Okay, it looks like we're kind of steady at about 30 people right now. I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is the next webinar that NATRC is doing in our Let's Ride Seminar Series for 2020. Today we're going to be, today's topic is obstacles, setting your horse up for success. The panelists today are myself, Bill Wingle. I'm out of Region 3. I've been riding for about 13 years in NATRC. It's basically, I'm a horse husband, and it's basically where I learned to ride. And so I have a little different perspective on things, and kind of I've been trying to grab things on how to get through obstacles and learn obstacles from people. We also have Kim Cowart and Esther Diagula, who are both horsemanship judges who actually do know how to ride and are good at riding. Kim Cowart is also our co-chair for the Judges Committee, and Esther definitely knows how to ride, being a President's Cup winner. The focus today is a little bit different than what you might be expecting for a talk on obstacles. We're not talking today on what the judges are looking for or on exactly how to do an obstacle, but we're looking more at what kind of the general things that you can do which will help you get the job done. We're trying to offer a series of tips and tricks and training techniques which will help you and your horse be successful. A lot of these are going to apply to any obstacle that you might do. At the very end, we're going to go through just a few specific obstacles with a few specific tips and tricks. Setting your horse, you and your horse up for success. If you wait till you get to the ride like I used to do, you're too late. You really want to start at home. It's really important that when you're learning obstacles, that if possible, you start in hand. Whenever you go out for a training rides just aren't to get your horse into shape, but they also offer opportunities for you to practice different obstacles and to teach your horse that not only do we ride down the trail, but we occasionally stop and do different things as well. Once you do get to the ride, though, there are things even at the ride and even at the obstacle that you to increase your chances for success. A lot of what we're doing here is just talking about, today what we're going to be talking about is a lot of the basic things you can teach your horse how to do, how to move its feet, some different little commands you can do, which can be applied to any obstacle. We, again, as I mentioned, will go through some specific things. I'll let Esther and Kim kind of pitch in anytime they don't like what I'm saying or have something important to add, and we'll just kind of keep going. So at home, really this starts at home at the stable. If you really would wait to get to the ride, you can learn quite a bit at the ride, but you're really not going to learn anything probably in time to do well on the obstacle. At home is a good place to start. At home, if you're fortunate enough to have your horse at home, you see your horse every day, you handle your horse every day. If it's at the stable, hopefully it's a few times a week or once a week that you're out to see the horse. And kind of what I try to do, we keep our horses at home and they see me 3 times a day. And so I don't make them do something every time I see them, but I do make them do something fairly every couple days. And it's like every time I move them from the stall to the paddock or back into the stall, or if I'm going out into the pasture, I will have them do something. I'll have them back into the stall. I'm in the parking lot, we'll step over a curb and do a side pass. I may walk into the parking lot and run down the parking lot a little bit and do a quick little circle. The idea here is, one, it gives me an opportunity to teach them how to do something if they don't know how to do it. But really what it is doing is it's a repetition where we're always doing something. It means that you've got to listen to me. And the more you can, these are really quick. They're like 30-second, 1-minute training sessions. And if you just kind of do these all a lot, they kind of expect that, oh, mom, dad's going to make me do something. And they'll listen to you and try to do it particularly if it's dinner time, because they want to have dinner. If they get it done, they get dinner sooner.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Kim.
I often tell people just to think of this as like fun homework. None of us like the term homework, but all these little things are the homework you do so that when you go to the ride, you're taking the test. So the ride's the test, you do the homework ahead of time. And that's part of what you were talking about, setting you up for success.
Yes. The other thing I like to do is with these at-home obstacles, or whether on their trail, always mix it up a little bit. It's if you have a log at home or a curb at home that you step across, and sometimes you just have them straddle it and then walk on. Sometimes you may have them side pass left, sometimes side pass right. Sometimes you don't make them straddle it, and you make them side pass in front or behind it. You want them to know kind of what you're after. You want to mix it up enough that they don't know exactly what you're going to ask for. Otherwise, the horses start to say, I know what you want, and I'm going to do it, and they just do it. And what happens is you get in front of a judge, and if the horse already knows what they're going to do, they're not listening to you. So the more you can kind of make sure they're listening to you by always doing something a little bit different, I find that helps. I like to just start everything in hand. It's if you're on the ground and you're in hand and you're trying to teach the horse how to do a particular obstacle, how to move their feet, if they're not doing it, you have opportunities to give some additional cues, whether it's you actually go and push on them, waving your hand, picking up their foot, like if you want to get them to step on the stump. It's with my girl, I've actually grabbed her foot and put it up on the stump. So it's in hand. There's a lot you can do once you're up in the saddle. If they're not doing it, if they don't understand what you're asking, it's much more challenging to get them to do it. I will sometimes, even if I'm in saddle and asking for something, if they don't get it, I'll just go ahead and dismount, and then we'll switch to in hand for a little bit, and then I'll remount and then try it again once they kind of have a clue for what I'm asking for.
I also use a lot of verbal cues when I'm teaching
absolutely.
something new.
Hey, Bill?
Yes.
Well,
Kim.
I didn't coin the phrase, but somebody a long time ago said, you ride the horse you lead. So you hit on this is really important homework. But, a disobedient, willful horse that doesn't listen to you on the ground and drags you around on the ground is probably going to do the same thing when you're on their back. So it's a great idea to remind people about the in-hand homework.
The other nice thing about what I like about in-hand lessons is you can do them anytime you're with the horse. If you're stabling your horse, or if you're just going out to lunch when you're at home and you're only going to be there for 5 or 10 minutes, it's something you can do very quickly. You don't have to tack up your horse, but it gives you an opportunity to kind of bond with your horse, be working as a team. They know that they need to pay attention to you, expect something. You can scratch them on the ears and give them a treat, and just it's kind of a give yourself an excuse to give your horse a treat is also kind of how I look at it. Also, a lot of things are safer from the ground, particularly when you're initially trying to desensitize your horse. And I'll move on from there. I've got more comments about desensitization later. When we talk about, a lot of times when we talk about going out on a trail ride, and in NATRC, it's one of the thoughts is, how many miles do I need to do? How do I train my horse to be able to do 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 miles a day and get in condition? And so we talk a lot about going out on training rides. But training rides, you can do a lot more than just go out and work on your horse's conditioning. When you're out on training rides, you should also be thinking about obstacles and always looking around for something you can do. And sometimes it's as simple as stopping in the trail and backing up a few steps, or if you're on a dirt road, side passing across the road, and maybe doing a little bit of a box out in the middle of the road. And this does a couple things for you. Is one, it's repetition and it gives you an opportunity to practice your obstacles. But the other thing it does is that you're also teaching your horse that we're just not running down the trail all the time, that I might be asking you to do something anywhere along the trail, and I want to be able to get your attention. And if you're doing training rides and you can't stop your horse and do an obstacle, chances are when you have when a judge not pops out of a bush, hopefully, but when you come around a corner and there's the judge saying, guess what, we have an obstacle, hopefully your horse will be willing to stop and listen and not think, I need to get down the trail. So training rides are a good, as one would expect, are a good opportunity for multiple reasons. When you're riding with your friends, it's also a good opportunity to challenge them and for them to challenge you back. Gives you an opportunity to practice things, to critique your friends, have your friends critique you and offer advice. And so it's just additional ways to, you're not only doing you shouldn't only be doing obstacle challenges when you're at the ride. It's something you just kind of integrate into your everyday trail riding.
I'd like to interject one thing in here. If you're with friends and they are doing obstacles, it's also teaching your horse to stand quietly until it's their turn.
Yes. The other thing I like about this is it's when you're back at the barn and you're doing your in-hand, pretty much once your horse figures out how to do something, they're always going to do it, or you can nudge them a little bit harder to do it. When you're out on trail, what I find with my girl quite a bit is that sometimes she'll do it, sometimes she won't. This can be for various reasons. Sometimes the horse doesn't understand she doesn't understand what I'm asking because I'm inconsistent with my cues, or I'm on uneven ground and my body's kind of twisted all over the place and I'm not giving a good cue. So it's like you can start to, the more conditions you can try to test you and your horse under, the better chances are you'll have success in communicating with your horse. Also, sometimes it's an attention issue. Again, it's that if your horse is just wanting to run down the trail and doesn't want to stop and do an obstacle, this is an opportunity for you to try to figure out how to get your horse's attention on the trail. You're going to have the same issue with a judge, where it's, if you can figure it out at home, you're going to be better off when you get out on the trail. Also, the issue is that the situation might be more difficult. You might be on a side slope. There might be some bushes around you, which is causing your horse to be more hesitant. And this gives you more opportunity to deal with new situations that are not in the idealized situation of the barn. Sometimes it's also just the horse being stubborn. My girl, she'll carry me anywhere, but like I remember more than one open ride. I'm out 30 miles. I've been out for 30 miles, and I come up to the judge, and my horse has just said, I'll carry you home. That's fine, but that's all I'm doing. And she's carried me for 30 miles. I will sometimes just say, that's fine. I get it. I'm a big guy. And other people might say that, no, you're going to do it regardless. And so you kind of learn how to deal with that situation.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Kim.
I'm kind of speaking from a personal point of view here, and it'll probably apply to other folks as well. And I just about always work on something or the other, just like you're saying. There are some times that I don't really want to have to condition really hard, and mentally I just don't want to have to be doing a lot of obstacle work. But I understand the value of it. So what I'll do when I leave, I have 2, maybe 3 things that are my goals for the day. I want to work on, say, standing in place better, or side passing to her worst side, or whatever. And I don't overload my brain with all the things I'm going to do. And I work on those 2 or 3 little problems, and the rest of the time I just kind of let myself relax and enjoy the day. So, it's important to do all these things. Maybe just make yourself a short list of what you want to work on for that day.
That's real good. I completely agree with that. I usually don't. I usually kind of look for obstacles of opportunity. There also I'll get out on some trail rides, and there are a few trails we do where I live that there's a particular log, there's a particular gate, and I think my horse knows those logs in that gate as well, because every time we come up to it, it's like, we're going to be doing this. And it's just kind of, she knows what to expect. She knows what she's supposed to do. I give her my cues. It reinforces that this cue means this thing, so she knows what to do. I reinforce the cue and we get it done, and then we continue on. And it's just kind of, again, repetition. When kind of moving on to the next thing. So we've talked about what you can do at the barn, what you can do at your at-home trail riding. When you get to the ride, you still have additional opportunities to improve your chance for success. A lot of people, and I try to do this but don't always, is for a multi-day ride, when you arrive like on Friday, assuming that there's time, it's a good idea to go out for a short ride. What this does is, when it loosens your horse up after a short or a fairly long trail ride, but it also, if you haven't been on your horse for a few days, your horse might be a little bit wound up. And I find with my horse, if I go out for a short trail ride, she may be very wound up at the beginning, but usually after a few miles, she'll calm down, and that calmness will usually last into the next day. And so it's the calmer your horse is when you get to those first trail challenges, the better off you're going to be. So if I can kind of calm her down the evening before, that's great. The morning of when you time out, again, it's if you're timing out at 7 in the morning, that doesn't mean that you should be throwing your saddle on 10 minutes before and getting over to the timing gate just as people are going out. It's good to be ready 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes beforehand and just start riding around camp a little bit. This does a few things. One, it loosens them up and it gets all the body fluids moving, and you have a chance to calm them down and warm them up so their body actually works. As Kim has commented, and he can comment on this more, is it also, if you go out and you do a few quick obstacles, you do a few backs, a little bit of side passing, it mentally warms them up as well. And it's mentally warms them up as well. The advantage, the sooner you can calm them down, the sooner you can get their brains working. When you get to that first obstacle that you know is going to be right out of camp, you have a chance to have a focused horse that you can actually control, as opposed to a horse that says, I'm going to canter for the first 5 miles. And Kim, you
I've as a judge, I find it interesting. I'm usually, not always, but usually around when people are warming their horses up. And I watch to see which riders try to mentally engage their horses before the day starts. And invariably, you'll see, more especially seasoned riders, that not only have loosened their horse up physically, but you'll see them off tucked away somewhere, doing a little bit of right, left, forward, back, flexing their horse. Just very quietly and subtle. But it's always interesting to me to see who is going to be doing that. So I think it sets you up to have an advantage and to succeed right from the get-go if your horse is listening to start.
I know that was something that took me a few years to figure out. It's like, man, I'm already getting up at 4:30 in the morning. I don't want to get up any earlier to take the time to warm up my horse. Particularly for me, who's a night person, who probably didn't get to bed till 12:30 the night before. So, but it's the more you can take advantage that morning, not that you have to get up really super early beforehand, but just to kind of get them moving, your brain working, their brain working.
I also like to walk myself to loosen me up, as well as the horse. The older you get, the more you need it.
Yes.
That's a good point.
And keep in mind that you're half the team out there, and if you're in agony, it's hard to focus on the obstacle. If you're stiff, it's hard to give the right cues. So getting both you and your horse limbered up is appropriate, is useful. When you get to the obstacle, there are a few things to keep in mind, to deal with. It's like, just because you're at the obstacle doesn't mean there still aren't things that you can do to improve your chances of getting through the obstacle successfully. The first and most obvious one is make sure you understand what the obstacle is. If you have questions, make sure you ask for clarification. Usually they're happy to give you a little bit more detail. Sometimes they're reading off of a script and that's what you have, but take any opportunity you can to figure out exactly what you're going to do. Once you do get the instructions, particularly if it's a little bit more of a complicated obstacle, or even if it's just a mount where it's walk up to the challenge and take a moment and just look around and take a look around, figure out what needs to be done. If you haven't done it before, kind of see if you can break it down into pieces that you more or less know how to do, and see if you can string those pieces together. As one comment, it's we often hear quite often from our judges is there's a saying that we've often heard, and it's called stop, settle, and slow. This is something Trish Cleveland out of Region 6, I think, started. And basically the idea is stop, take a deep breath, look around, figure out what you're going to do, settle yourself, try to settle your horse, and then slowly move through the obstacle. This doesn't mean that you have 5 minutes to do it, but most trail challenges, if you just kind of take a steady pace, doesn't have to be fast, you'll get it done in a reasonable period of time. We're not apt to, nobody has to do a land speed record to get through an obstacle. You don't get bonus points for doing it super fast. We just want you to move along nicely through it and get it done. There are a couple additional things when you're at the obstacle and just coming up to the obstacle. One is you're usually riding, most people ride with a partner, not everybody, but if you're riding with a partner, and you'll learn this after a few rides, is that sometimes it's better for you to go first, sometimes it's better for you to go second. And this is, horses have preferences. If you go second, it's the horse. If you go second, your horse is just watching the horse in front of you, and he's not going anywhere, so he's usually pretty happy to content and just stand there. My horse tends to prefer to go first, but you kind of learn which works best for you. When you're riding with another partner, they may have their own opinions, so you may have to work together on that and trade off a little bit. But if you're desperate for a first place and your riding partner is willing to work with you, they will often say, oh, you work better going first, I'll let you always go first. And keep that in mind, and sometimes just the order can give you a better chance of getting through the obstacle. When you start an obstacle, I've had this happen, is particularly when I was still learning how to do obstacles, is and I still am, is that I'll come up to something and I'll give my horse a command, and she won't do anything. I'll make sure I'm giving a body cue. I'll make sure I give it a voice cue. Sometimes that doesn't work. If I'm a little bit more prepared and I know that this is a difficult obstacle, I might have my crop in my hand so I can tap her shoulder to get her to do something, get her to move a little bit. I've also, like on a side pass, I always side pass with my hand onto the side of her, swinging my hand, and I've swung my hand next to her. It usually doesn't work, but it has worked a few times, and so it's always good to try to have a backup plan. You're probably get a hesitation on your horse, but at least you have a better chance of succeeding. When you come up to an obstacle and it's a multi-part obstacle, this might be where it's specifically multi-part, where they say side pass over this log. Well, a good example is a box where they'll say side pass 3 steps to the right, back up, side pass 3 steps to the left, and walk forward and complete this kind of virtual box. If you just go into that obstacle and you give your horse cues to side pass, and then you start giving him cues to back up, and then you start kicking in the other way to go side pass the other way, you might get a horse that says, what are you trying to tell me? I'm getting all these different signals from you and I'm getting confused. One thing to do is, for like the initial side pass, you do the side pass and then stop and positively reward your horse at the end of that phase and say, okay, we're done with that. We're done with that step. And then you can back up, reward your horse again, say, okay, we're now done with that step, and break each step into little pieces and let your horse know when you're done with each piece. It will take a lot of the confusion away and you have a better chance of getting everything done. Again, at obstacles, when you're around other people, I could have organized these a little bit differently, but it's better, but this is kind of how we're working through it. When you're coming up to an obstacle, it's either with your partner or you've catched up with some other people and doing an obstacle. Some people like to watch the people in front of them. That has some advantages in that if you watch them, you might learn something and see a different way of doing something that you hadn't thought of. You also risk, if you watch them, you also risk reenacting a little bit of a monkey see, monkey do moment where they do something wrong and you go up and without clarification, you do the same thing incorrectly. Horses will do the same thing. And I've ridden with a lot of people and they will not let their horse watch the horse in front of them. And for this monkey see, monkey do type thing. Horses will watch the horse up in front and say, I know how to do that. And they'll go up there and they'll do exactly what the previous horse had done, regardless of what you were asking him to do. Unfortunately, if the previous horse did it incorrectly, you've just done it incorrectly as well. So it's this, both of these are kind of learning something about yourself and learning something about your horse on whether you just even want to watch what's going on up in front of you. Kim.
Yeah, now, monkey see, monkey do is a real thing. Esther can attest to that.
Oh, yes.
I've often seen some kind of strange things happen, but the other side of that is, a lot of successful riders use the process of visualization. I know they do. They've talked about it. I've used it. I bet you guys have too. A lot of us do. So, if you can watch what's going on, at least to tip you off to some good and bad, and are confident enough in that homework you did, I would encourage you to take a minute and really visualize how you want to do it. Toss out all the monkey see, monkey do stuff, but think about how Bill and Mariah are going to do this obstacle well. Run it through your mind 2 or 3 times before you just walk up there cold without ever having any thought about it.
Yeah, I always like, every time I've been given a challenge and I come up, I always like to spend a few seconds it's like, what am I going to do? What's my game plan? This is particularly, and sometimes I'll even do this on the simple obstacles. One that gets a lot of people in trouble is a simple in and out, where you drop down into a ditch, there's a little flat spot and you need to climb out the other side. It seems really easy. And usually it's like you go down and you enter it, you hold yourself vertical, everything's great, you hit the bottom, and then your horse wants to just blast out the other side. And all of a sudden you find out you're sitting on the cantle and hanging on for dear life. If you stop to think about it a little bit, And a lot of people, it's like with a simple in and out, assuming there's space at the bottom, is you'll go down, you'll look great, and then at the bottom you'll stop your horse, grab some mane, get yourself reoriented, and then climb out the other side. And just stopping and thinking about it for a few seconds beforehand, and a game plan, even for something as simple as an in and out, can make you more successful, can make you not kick yourself afterwards. It's like, I know how to do that. I can't believe I let that happen. And that's one of your half dozen obstacles for the weekend, and you wind up kicking yourself for the next 2 miles. Kind of that said is, after the obstacle, when you haven't done it quite as well as you hoped, is often I'll right away from the judge and to give space for everybody else. And then I'll go ahead and I'll try it again. And I'll, assuming it's an obstacle that you can try again. And part of this is just to figure out, one, if it's an obstacle I usually can do, is if I just gave some bad cues and I was in a hurry and then she does know how to do it today. Or is it something that I really do need to work on, and just kind of focus on it a little bit more away from the judge, to have a little bit more time to think about it. Again, with all this, it's just kind of everything we've been saying today is kind of focusing on the basics, thinking about when you get up into obstacles, thinking about what you're going to do, how to step through the obstacle, focusing on your horses. What you're asking your horse to do is usually just a bunch of little steps, whether it's moving one leg at a time in a particular direction, and if as a side pass, it's moving multiple feet in a particular direction over and over again. If we get into more complicated obstacles, like doing a figure eight around of a tree, it's just a combination of backs and turns and backs and turns. And you probably know how to do all those individually, and then it's a matter of stringing them together. This is kind of a sidetracking a little bit, or diverting a little from what you could traditionally think of as an obstacle, but desensitizing the horse is another thing that's important. And this is more aimed at the vets than at the horsemanship judges, is when you do your check-in, check-outs, you want your horse to be comfortable around other people, and have other people, somebody else who they don't know is touching them all over the place, is getting very personal, is picking up their feet, is sticking their hands in their mouth. It's good to desensitize your horse. I personally like to make a habit of, sometimes I'll just be standing there next to my horse if I'm waiting in line or something. I'll just start picking up her feet, her front feet or back feet, tapping on it with my hoof pick. She just gets comfortable with, oh man, he's harassing me again, and it'll be over in a minute. But in the long run, this will make your vet happier, it'll make your farriers happier. Again, poking and prodding, particularly by other people, having them grab, look at their teeth, things like this. The more they get used to just having other people around them and everything, it just kind of desensitizes them, allows the vets to do their job, the P&R people to do their job. You don't lose silly points because your horse can't stand next to the vet judge. This is a big thing for me and Mariah, is teaching her to stand next to things. She absolutely hates getting close to anything. So it's one of those things I have to work on, I'm still working on. And I'm having to desensitize her to things like balls and bags and jackets. And it's like a jacket, whether I'm putting it on her when I'm on her, or at an obstacle where they say, see that jacket hanging in the tree, go grab it and pull it across your saddle and give it to the judge. It's not something she really cares for, and it's part of that desensitization. And these again are all those small little things that you can do at home or out on the trail that you may not really think of as being obstacles, but they really are, because it's something, people have eyes on you on the trail and are trying to see what you can do. It's also a safety thing. You should be able to put your rain jacket on, or as I learned the hard way, is the first time you open up a map, don't do it when you're sitting on your horse's back. I landed on the ground and cracked my helmet. Desensitization is good.
Hey,
Another,
Bill.
yes.
One thing that you can do is teach your horse to touch. If they're afraid of something, teach them to touch it and reward them when they do touch it.
I've seen that we have a, Diane and I, we have a new, relatively new mare, and it's, she's not afraid of anything, and the way what she does is she goes up and she noses everything, and that's exactly, it's like when she noses it and it doesn't bite her back, she knows it's not anything to worry about, and it's been a good thing. One other thing with kind of desensitization and in a little different way is when you're riding in groups, some horses like to lead, some like to follow. It's good if you mix that up, because when you're out on a trail ride, at a competitive trail ride, you may not be riding with your regular buddies who will let you ride wherever you want. You may need to mix it up a little bit. And if you're not riding in the position where your horse prefers, you're having to ride in back and your horse really wants to lead, it's going to kind of wind them up. And so the more you can mix them up so they can ride anywhere, and the last kind of thing I hear is learn to pass other horses and be passed. Is if you can keep your horse, if you're getting your horse wound up because it doesn't like where it's at, and you come up to an obstacle and you have a wound up horse, it's going to be more challenging for you to get through the obstacle well. So if you can learn to ride anywhere, ideally, or if you haven't gotten that far, is to figure out where your horse likes to be when you're riding through areas and ride that way. The calmer you can keep your horse, so when you do get to the challenge, the better off you'll be. It's kind of, may not make a big difference, but it may give you a slight advantage over other things.
We have a question.
Yes, question.
Is touch teaching oriented, example using a wand, or how do they know what you want them to touch? Basically what I do when I'm teaching Dana to touch something, if she spooks at something or if she shies away from it, I immediately turn her toward it and I will tell her to touch. And she knows that that's what I want her to touch. And if she walks up and puts her nose on it, she gets a treat. And it's just learning to read your horse and knowing what they are anxious around. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
Hey, Bill.
Kim.
Of course, desensitizing a horse can be a huge process, and it's nearly impossible to desensitize a horse to everything out in the world. So, you know, that's why it's so critical to do a lot of these things you're talking about are just ways of making a horse handy, or ways of making a horse more mentally supple.
Yep.
So
I
can't get my words out, but the horse is more mentally in tune to you, willing to listen. After a while, you know, you find you don't have to desensitize them to every obstacle or every object in the world, because you know, they've begun to trust you and listen to you. So it's a process that doesn't have to be quantified on everything out there, as long as you're consistent with how you gently and firm.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I'm not sure how much it works, but it seems to work with Mariah and I, where when we're riding along and I see a mountain bike, I'll say it's just a mountain bike or it's just a hiker. And I think she's kind of started to learn from me whenever I say it's like, I've seen it, she's seen it or is about to see it, and she knows I'm not worried about it. And then she kind of says, okay, if he's not worried about it, I don't have to worry about it. And that it's not perfect, but it does seem to work to some extent. And so
yeah, I do the same thing with Dana. If there's something out there and she looks at it, I'll look at it and I'll tell her I see it, and then that's it. Okay, she's seen it, so we're good.
Yep. Commands, kind of moving on. A couple things here. This slide got a little confused when I was setting up. But the main thing I wanted to say here, a real silly way to lose points on an obstacle is to forget to have two hands on your reins or 2 hands on your lead lines. In NATRC, this is something we pretty much require all the time, and it's a safety thing. It's so if the horse yanks and one hand comes free, you probably still have the other in the backup. It also offers you a little bit more control. It can be a little bit awkward when you're first learning to do it, but you get used to it. And so always focus on keeping 2 hands on the reins and the lead line. Also always good to have in your back pocket some commands that your horse knows that you're serious about when you say them. The obvious one is whoa. It's no fun to be on a horse that won't stop. Stand is important. Sometimes my horse will get a little bit lazy and I'll start saying hep, hep, hep. And when I say that, it's like, no, we really do need to get to work. And it's, and usually and often that's in front of a judge when they want a canter. We're going to get that canter. And so have some commands so when you say them, they know that you're serious and it's not optional or when you have time. This one is for you, not your horse. It's watch where you're looking. Sorry, you're always watching where you're looking. Look at what are you looking at? When you're going down the trail, when you're going over some trail obstacles, look ahead. Your horse is going to make sure it doesn't trip and stumble over the trees and rocks. Your job is to figure out where you're going and to look down the trail and figure out what's coming. Let your horse take care of it. Don't be looking over your horse's shoulder, figuring out what it's doing. If you do, you're going to be throwing it off. A simple one, when you're side passing, this is what I got caught in this when I was learning to ride and learning to side pass is I would step over a log and I'd side pass to the right. I'd give it a cue to the right, but I'm still looking straight ahead. If you're side passing to the right, look to the right. Your horse will feel it, that you're looking that direction. It also gives you the advantage that if there's a branch sticking out of the tree or whatever, you can protect your horse and that you don't make it side pass into something that you really shouldn't. Okay, here we're going to get into, so that's kind of the general things that you can do to be successful. The setup of teaching your horse the basics, thinking about how you're going to move through an obstacle. Those are things that apply to all obstacles. Now we're going to get into some of the specific obstacles. We're going to start with the mount. There are a bunch of kind of little tips and tricks here. And I'll let Kim and Esther jump in on this more now. But basically, one of the first things, when you get to an obstacle, the judge it's like we all know how to mount. And when the judge tells you to mount, they really just want you to get on the horse and do it quickly and efficiently. There's not really any need to dawdle. If you spend too much time micromanaging your horse to get it perfect, 1, it's going to take forever, and 2, it's probably not going to help your score, and 3, your horse is going to get antsy with your kind of moving the back end back and forth, and it's never going to be exactly perfect. Often it's just get the horse in there so it's good enough so you can mount. That said, before you get to the horse for the mount, make sure you've checked your girth, make sure it's tight, and be ready to mount. When you come up to the mount, look around at if there's a mounting block, that's great, but also just because the judge is standing out in the middle of a flat area doesn't mean that you need to mount right in front of him. It's fair to look around and see if there's a stump or a rock or even a picnic table to give you something to step up on to make the mount a little bit easier. The judge will appreciate that you're taking advantage of terrain. It's also easier on your horse if you're not always doing a flat mount.
Bill,
Esther.
a lot of times when people, they do choose to do flat mounts, which is perfectly all right. But what happens all too often is that when they go to get on, they pull that saddle on that horse's back, and they will lose points for that. That's why we really like to see you use the mounting block or terrain or anything that's available.
It's particularly for me, who's a bigger guy. It's if I'm doing a flat mount, I've learned it's like it's I can do a flat mount if I have to, but it's a lot easier on my horse if I don't. I'm a big guy pulling on her spine, and the higher up I can get, the better it is for her. So that's kind of the logic for it. It is good to be able to do a flat mount, but if you don't have to, why put your horse through it has always been kind of my opinion.
Right. And your horse does not have to be squared up to the mounting block. As long as they're close enough, that's fine.
Kim?
Yeah, of course, it's, it's already been scientifically proven that, mounting from a block or a rock or something like that, not from the flat, is better for your back. So I always encourage people, if you can, use something. Most rides nowadays, if I know a spot that I'm going to do a judged mount, I ask to have a mounting block brought out on the trail if possible. And but I pretty much require the block to stay in place. So I call it the big rock, just happens to have steps carved into it. But what you often find is that, everybody can get on their horse. They got on their horse to get to where they were. But in the moment of being asked to actually mount, some of that obstacle amnesia maybe comes into place. And so I think a lot of people have more problems just getting their horse in position for a mounting block than they do actually then getting on the horse. So that's one of those homework things for you guys. If you're going to mount on the block, Esther's right. You don't have to be perfectly square to it, but you do have to have the horse accustomed to getting up close to that block and standing in place long enough for you to get on. So that's a good little homework for you to do. And it allows you to use that block or rock or log or whatever to ease your horses back a little bit.
Okay. Once you have your horse up next to the mounting block or terrain or whatever, it's sometimes your horses are a little bit lazy and they haven't squared up, or you haven't positioned them quite right and they're really not square. You really want to try to square your horse up if you can. This will give this when you swing up and mount and you come down on the horse, you're less likely to throw it off balance. So to square your horse up, you can give it a little pressure on the lead rope, on your reins. You can tap the leg of your horse a little bit to have them step forward or back, if that will help. I've pulled on the stirrup leather to kind of throw them off balance so then they re-square. As Jamie Dietrich has said, is if you're on the ground and your horse is standing on one leg in the rear, you can grab the tail and pull that and to square up the rear end. And I've done that too.
Hey, Bill.
Kim.
I'm listening to you and reading this particular slide. I better clarify now. When I've said you didn't necessarily need to be squared up, I'm talking about
right.
Yeah, you do need to get that horse square, get his feet up under him. But I was talking about the block itself didn't have to be
right. And that's something I've done where it's all come up to the mounting block or some terrain, and Mariah, she'll be off at 45 degrees or whatever to the mounting block, and that it's the stirrups where I need it, and I can swing up easily, and that's good enough. The square rear here is when they're not balanced on all four feet.
Right.
So sorry for the confusion on language.
No, I'm the one that was the one said something confusing.
Well, no,
I think I had a share in it too.
We all had a share. All right. The next simple things, if at all possible, always mount from the uphill side. If you're mounting from the downhill side, it's just that much farther to get up. If you're on on a road that has some grade to it, and have your horse's head and front feet uphill rather than downhill, it's when you go to swing your leg up, it's a lot easier to not kick the butt when the butt's a little bit lower than when it's raised up a little bit higher.
All right, we have a question.
Yes.
For scoring purposes, is it better to bring your horse up to the mounting block, get them squared up from the ground, and then mount? Are there extra points for getting them close to the mounting block, but squaring them up, asking them to move, etc., from the mounting block?
All right, well, me and you both could answer that, Esther. Number one, I don't give extra points for you walking up on the block and squaring the horse after you're up there. I'm judging the end result. So most people do a better job if they get the horse in position, step up on the block, and get on. There's some people that have really good control of their horse's body and can step up onto the block, and they ask the horse to come over and get them, and the horse will move his body over there and get on. So whichever one works the best for you is what I would suggest.
I have found it's with my girl, what I have found is if I try to square my horse up while I'm still down on the ground and I get her exactly where I want, as soon as I go hop up on the mounting block or the rock or whatever, she will often move. And so kind of all that effort I spent micromanaging exactly where I wanted her on the ground is a bit wasted. So I basically try to get her close when I'm on the ground, get up on the mounting block, and then by holding the reins or touching her a little bit, then I kind of finish it off and get it close enough to where I can actually get on. So
from a horsemanship judge's point, no, there's no such thing as extra points. I hate to say that, but we score fair, good, excellent, and so forth. So if you move your horse over to the mounting block, that's great. I'm not going to score that. The vet judge might, but I will not. I'm watching you get on your horse to see how you mount.
Okay. Continuing the mount a little bit, it's a few additional things. Before you mount, it's important to make sure that you have the reins so that they're even and set to apply some pressure in case your horse decides to walk off on you, so you can stop that before it gets out of control. I learned, a judge told me a trick a long time ago, and this helped me a lot with the mount, was when you mount is to look off at the horizon when you're swinging up. The reason there is it helps me stay vertical and it helps me land more softly, and that's worked for me. Talking to Esther and Kim and watching a number of other people mount, I've seen people also instead prefer to focus on their horse's head, so that if that horse starts to move off, they know instantly that the horse is doing something, and they can react to it. You can see in this picture here, this person's actually kind of doing both. They're looking off in the distance, but they have the horse's head in their field of view. And you can see she's in a very exposed position at this point in time. If the horse starts to walk off, she can be on the ground very quickly. But here she's looking off in the distance, which is helping keep her upright. At the same time, she's watching the horse, so if something happens, she can respond. Again, with mounts, in NATRC, we expect you to be able to mount from either side, a regular mount or an offside mount. One of the things I learned very early on was when you're at home, when you're trail riding, forget about what side that you're supposed to mount on. It's kind of alternate it. It's try to make it 50-50. You should always practice getting on. You should be practicing getting on both sides of the horse, getting off both sides of the horse. The reason is if you're out on a trail in a difficult position, there may only be one safe way to get off the horse, and it may not, if you only get off on the regular side, that may not be it. And getting off a horse that's not used to you getting off the other side may just compound the problem that you aren't familiar with it either. So practice whenever you mount, just kind of alternate it as much as you can remember. That will help. When you do get on the horse, after you mount, horses like to walk off. that's a habit you need to break quickly from a safety point of view, also from a scoring point of view. To break that habit, there are a number of things you can do. Once you're on, you can just kind of rein up a little bit and make sure that they stand there for a little bit. Instead of walking off forward, you can back them away from the mounting block or the obstacle. You can have them side pass away. You might even just dismount off the other side. You want to train your horse that that as soon as you're on the horse, you're not walking off. Safety is a safety thing. My wife and I know a number of people will offer a treat after they get on, after they mount. My wife's horse Eddie, it's when she's on, he's not going anywhere until he gets that treat, and it's kind of a it's kind of a gimmick, but it's safe, and he's happy, and we're happy, and everybody's safe.
Hey, Bill.
Yes, Jim.
I would probably suggest that this is one of the most basic of safety things that you and your horse can do, and that is, a vulnerable time when you're swinging up on the horse's back. So right from the get-go, that horse should be taught, however means, whether you use a treat or whatever. No matter where I am or what I'm doing, I pretty much won't ever let my horse move off until I ask. And if she tries to, or whatever horse I'm riding, we work on that right then. It's one of those things, what you allow, you encourage. And, if the horse gets to walk away and he never gets questioned about it, then he doesn't even know he's doing anything wrong. He just does it. He's just being a horse. So all you guys spend a lot of time with that one for your own safety.
And there will be a mount at every ride you ever go to in this sport, so you will be judged on it. So this is one good. This is one thing to perfect and figure out. I can't think of a ride I've ever been to that hasn't had a mount. Let's see. This is another specific obstacle. This is just a simple backup where you're backing up straight. And what we're looking for here, kind of the few basic steps, I picked this one because it's easy, is we do expect you to look over both shoulders, kind of clear where the horse is backing, make sure that there's nothing behind your horse that they're going to back into. Or if there is something behind them, like they have to step up a little bit out of the trail or something, that you know that you're going to have to give a little bit more pressure on your horse because they're going to run into something, or encourage them to lift up their leg a little bit so they'll step up onto it. It's something worth practicing. It's definitely something worth practicing. Once you have lined up, once you have checked though, to back up straight, it's very difficult to do it if you're looking over one shoulder or the other. That will tend to cause you to, your horse to veer off a little bit. It's best to pick a point way out in front of you. And then as you start to back up, if that point way out in front of you shifts left or right, you can then do corrections. Correct your horse, you steer or guide with your legs. So if you do get a little bit off, if your view is swinging off to the left, you want to give a little right pressure to pull that point back in. With your reins, really all you're doing is you're giving pressure and release to encourage them to move backwards. Once they do, you go ahead and release. Ideally, you're doing this one step at a time. If it's an easy thing, you can just kind of keep going one step, one step, one step. If it's more challenging, you may want to slow that down a little bit. Okay.
We have a question. We've done backing figure eights before. Where do you look?
I will start with that one. When I'm backing a figure eight, I will be looking at the inside of the turn. It's like we just did for the obstacle challenge for September, was backing a figure eight around a couple trees. And I'm always looking at the inside turn, kind of at the back legs, because I'm always trying to make sure that it's hard to clear everything in that much of a turn. And so I'm trying to always see where the back legs, where the back feet are, and steering the back feet. So I'm kind of doing a backup, a turn on the forehand, moving the butt back into the tree and working my way around and flipping that around. Now I'll let an actual judge who knows how to ride answer that.
Go ahead.
Well, when you were describing it, I mean, I had to stop and think about it, but that's what I do, is I keep an eye on that inside rear and back them that way.
Well, when you're setting up to do the figure eight or back in a circle or whatever you're going to do, you know, you have an opportunity to see what you are going to be backing in, around, through. So checking, when we talk about looking over your shoulder and check where you're going when you're backing, it's mostly to make sure you have no obstructions, obstacles, anything you're going to get you and your horse into. Then you kind of shift your focus. But the way you guys describe it makes the most sense, because that inside is the most likely to be impacted by whatever you're backing around. So if it's trees or poles or whatever, so that's the most natural way to look at it. Y'all described it well.
Okay, so we'll move on to the last slide, which is good because we're out of time. So I put up this last slide here for a gate, and the gate is probably, it's something I still have a lot of trouble with, and it's for a few reasons. One, there's a lot of components to doing a gate, and two, my girl absolutely hates getting next to things. So that's something I'm still working on. But I put this series of slides together here. This is an open rider here in Region 3. And in the first slide here, you'll see, wow, she looks way out of position. And don't look at that. And what's important here is, one, the setting here is we're on a road. It actually has quite a steep slope to it. There's quite the gradient to it. This gate was tied with a baling twine down low and hooked over this post over here, and the gate wanted to swing away from the riders. And so it was a difficult spot to get into, and you can see that she's challenged to reach down to get to the string. But what you'll notice is, as much as she's out of position and leaning over in every which way, this horse is standing rock still. And so she's put a lot of effort into teaching this horse hand regardless of what she's doing. And so that's a very basic thing, which is letting her do a lot of things from the saddle. Once she gets control of the gate, though, fairly easily, she slowly and easily moves around the gate to get to the other side. And then once she's on the other side, she's using a couple different moves here. One, she's very close to the gate, so the horse is comfortable with the gate. She's side passing into the gate to close it, and she's also having to back up this hill somewhat to get back up to the post where she's going to rehook this. So this is an example of taking a lot of simple things, piecing them together, and doing something much more difficult. That's all we really had. I don't know if Kent or Esther want to comment more on this series of slides. If you have some other comments that you'd like to make. But as basically, it's how I look at setting yourself up for success is work on the basics. There are lots of simple things you can teach your horse: moving your feet around, side pass, backing up, and a lot of things all just build off of that. Big one is trying to figure out how to keep your horse calm, stop, settle, slow, and looking at the obstacle and planning out exactly what you want to do in advance before you jump into it. I'll leave it at that. Are there questions do people have questions?
I don't see any more.
Okay.
One thing I would like to add, never be afraid to ask for help or advice from judges, any open riders, any competitive trail riders, anybody out there. We're more than happy to help you in any way possible. Okay, we have a question. Oh, great presentation. Thanks so much.
We appreciate that.
I would say also to the newer people, when you come up to an obstacle, if it's something you have not seen before, you know, Bill touched on it, but please ask the judge to clarify and make sure you understand what needs to be done. Because, you know, sometimes if we start overthinking it, which people do, you can make it more complicated on yourself. So just ask us to make double sure what it is you need to do.
Okay, I have a question here. It sounds like quiet and solid score the most points. It's fancy stuff scored higher.
Solid always is my preference. I like to see quiet and solid. But now, I'm just speaking as a judge, you know, I don't give points. I don't have extra points I can give, but I can give excellence and pluses and some things and ways to kind of recognize that fancy that you're talking about. So there are times when someone does an exceptionally good or exceptionally fancy job that it could earn them a little extra credit as far as pluses and exceptional comments on the card.
Yeah, there are kind of two answers to that depending what division you're in. If you're if you're doing an A, or if you're writing novice, CP, or open, basically if you do the obstacle and you do it well, you'll get full credit. Sometimes you'll get a woohoo or a woohoo or a star, which is kind of extra credit. And at the end of the day, when all the scores are added up, if there is a tie, the judges will then often go and look for those woohoos and extra stars and break ties based on those stars. But if you had a solid ride and you do everything well, you will, in theory, get the same score as somebody who's just pretty, all that is very pretty and does everything right and is very pretty. But if you're solid, you can get the same score. In the leisure division, it's a little bit different in that we score on excellent, very good, needs work, and did not complete. And so in the leisure division, kind of that extra little bit might gain you an extra point, where it wouldn't in the novice and CP and open divisions. So it's a little bit different between the divisions.
Okay, we have 3 questions here. The first one is, when doing a ride through the ditch, is it okay to ask if you can stop at the bottom? Yes,
It's always okay to
ask. Yeah, and if the judge doesn't want you to, they'll let you know. The second one is, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to score excellent.
Well, okay. That could vary possibly from judge to judge. I'm just using myself for an example. If somebody does a job, whether it's an uphill position or an obstacle like a gate or whatever, if I give them an excellent in my notes, an excellent on their card, I attach a plus with that. So they got a plus added to their comment on that score. Now that may or may not place them higher than somebody else, but it does give them that little bit of a leg up in the case of really close scoring or a tie or something like that. It possibly could come into play. I think it's always probably better to have an excellent than not have an excellent. So
yeah,
yes.
And I do mine just a little bit different than Kim. I don't like to give pluses and minuses, but what I will do is if I see that you have done the obstacle well and your horse has done it well with you, responding to you, your cues are very good, I'll give you an excellent. If it's flawless, it flows smoothly, and it just is really prettily done, I'll give you a beautiful. And so if there is a tie there, I'm going to look to the beautiful, which is like a plus, and place them over the excellent.
yeah, maybe I should also clarify that for me, a plus is more for my edification than anything else. It is a way I identify a really good job, but it helps me keep a clear picture and I look back at the cards and go, oh yeah, Bill was awesome when he did that. So
That doesn't happen.
Okay, the last question is a horse docked a lot of points if they opened their mouth when backing? My mule had no back when I got him. He will back now, but typically opens his mouth. I am working on it and always apply minimal pressure to start.
that would be best answered by a vet judge. As a horsemanship judge, if I thought that your hands were really heavy, if you were pulling and yanking and trying to forcefully move that horse backwards, which resulted in him yawing his mouth open, then yes, I would probably have a comment about that. Conversely, if it was just the mule being resistant to the rider, then that would be a comment that the vet judge might comment upon. Does that make some sense? I hope.
Yeah, I agree. That's the way that I would look at it as well. Oh, wait a minute. I have a question. What is the purpose?
So that's
Bill?
a halter. That's a halter bridle. What is the purpose of the strap around the horse's neck up high in the last set of slides? So that would be this strap right here. I'm assuming that they're referring to.
And she's got a neck strap on the horse.
Yeah.
Oh, here. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I do is you can use it for if your horse bolts from you, you have your identification on there. I also prefer to use a neck collar when highlining my horse rather than a halter. I find that they can rest easier, they can eat easier, their head is more free. But the neck collar, a lot of people use for identification purposes.
Yeah, Esther, I think y'all just saw came through that on this particular horse, it's an ID tag, ID halter, or ID collars. Excuse me.
And I think that would be appropriate with this rider. This horse did get away at one ride for 1 or 2 or 3 days, and I think after that, she was much more concerned that she was out of state at the time, and it was a bit of a mess. But she did get the horse back, but I think after that, it kind of scared her and said, if my horse does get away, I need to be able to have people find it and identify it. So that the ID makes a lot of sense.
Bill, if anybody on here, if I said something that you want clarification on, please reach out to me. I'm sure Esther feels the same way. So.
Absolutely.
Yes, likewise. I don't have our email addresses here. You can get a hold of any of us if you know our email addresses, or Facebook contact us, or you can email Sarah at natrc@natrc.org, and she'll forward on the messages. All right, I think we're done. Thank you, everybody, for attending. We appreciate your attendance and enjoyed doing this.
Thank you.
We will be having another webinar, again, the 4th Wednesday of October, and that will again be on obstacles, but I think the focus is going to be on what was done during the Trail Challenge series this summer. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be the focus of it, and we'd love to have you attend that one as well. And thank you, and have a good night.